Back to school? Seriously? High school? Nick choked, coffee erupting from his nostrils. Captain Johnson smirked. Operation Teen Dream, you're up. We're too old for this, Tony groaned, adjusting his holster uncomfortably. 2 weeks later, armed with fake IDs and crippling anxiety, they walked through the high school doors. This is a disaster waiting to happen, Nick muttered, already feeling hopelessly out of place. Tony, crammed into skinny jeans, tripped, taking down a cheerleader pyramid. Sorry, he squeaked, his voice cracking awkwardly. Nick fared no better. He spent history class trying to send a text on his pager. Dude, what is that ancient artifact? A student with a purple mohawk snickered. Their cover was thinner than cheap toilet paper. The cafeteria was a minefield of social dynamics and questionable food. Mystery meat again? Tony grimaced, poking at his lunch with a fork. Focus, Tony, Nick hissed. See that group over there? They're our leads. The group, led by a lanky kid with shifty eyes, was rumored to be peddling something called Bliss. Bliss? Sounds like a breakfast cereal, Tony muttered. More like a one-way ticket to juvie, Nick corrected, noting their every move. Gym class was a special kind of torture, especially for two out-of-shape cops. Dodgeball? Seriously? Tony wheezed, dodging a projectile with the grace of a rhinoceros. Their attempts to infiltrate the cool kids group were met with suspicion and eye rolls. Nice try, Grandpa, sneered Brittany, the school's queen bee, her perfectly manicured nails tapping impatiently on her smartphone. This is hopeless, Tony sighed, collapsing onto a bench. Section 5. The Big Bust Operation Prom Night, the climax of their investigation. Nick, sporting a rented tux 2 sizes too small, adjusted his earpiece. Ready, Tony? As I'll ever be, Tony muttered, his borrowed bow tie askew. The plan was simple. Bust the dealers during their planned drug drop. Showtime, Nick whispered as they saw their suspects exchange a duffel bag for an envelope stuffed with cash. The arrest was swift, the evidence undeniable. Bliss turned out to be a dangerous new synthetic drug, and Nick and Tony were hailed as heroes. We actually did it, Tony said, a slow grin spreading across his face. Don't get cocky, Nick chuckled, but yeah, we were pretty awesome. They returned to their precinct, a newfound respect for teenagers and a locker full of embarrassing stories. The case was closed, but its impact lingered. Nick found himself reminiscing about his own awkward teenage years. Tony, inspired by his undercover experience, even tried and failed to teach his niece the latest TikTok dance. Maybe there's some good in going back to school, Nick mused one day. As long as it doesn't involve dodgeball, Tony shuddered. Life at the precinct returned to its familiar rhythm, but something had changed. The once dreaded staff meetings now seemed less mundane. The chipped coffee mugs held a strange sense of comfort. Nick and Tony, bonded by their undercover adventure, found themselves looking forward to their shifts. They had faced their fears, embraced the ridiculous, and emerged victorious. 5 years later, Nick and Tony received an invitation that made them groan in unison. Their high school reunion. No way we're going back there, Tony said, shaking his head. But curiosity, and perhaps a touch of nostalgia, got the better of them. As they walked into the reunion, they were greeted by a familiar face. Brittany, the former queen bee, now a successful entrepreneur. You guys saved my life, she said, her voice filled with gratitude. That drug ring, I was in way over my head. Nick and Tony exchanged a surprised look. Their undercover operation had had a far greater impact than they could have imagined.